He had mansions, friends driven by interest, and a perfect lie, his own illness. When the flowers wilted and the visits stopped, only a simple woman knocked on the door, asking for nothing. What happens when a millionaire discovers that care cannot be bought? The Beverly Hills mansion felt different in April. Alexander Sampson stood at his bedroom window watching sprinklers trace patterns across the lawn, water catching light like scattered glass. 41 years old, founder of a healthcare network that bore his name on 18 clinics across Southern California, and he couldn't remember the last time someone had asked how he slept. The decision came quietly, the way most honest things do. He'd been sitting in his office downtown reviewing partnership agreements when his sister, Helen's assistant, called, third time that month, to reschedule lunch. Always the assistant. Never Helen's voice. The pattern repeated everywhere. His attorney handling his ex-girlfriend's questions about shared investments, board members sending congratulations through secretaries, suppliers timing their compliments to contract renewals. He set down his pen and felt the silence of the 40th floor. That evening, he told Charles Barrett, his house manager, about the plan. Charles stood in the doorway of the study, shoulders squared in his usual gray suit, silver hair perfectly combed. The man had worked for Alexander's family for 12 years, knew every supplier, every appointment, every preference. "I'll be taking a medical leave," Alexander said. 9 months. "Tell the staff I'm under treatment. Nothing specific. Just tired. Need rest." Charles's expression didn't shift. "Of course, sir. I'll handle everything. The board will manage operations. Dr. Patel stays as medical director. I've arranged external audits to continue. Patients won't be affected. And visitors?" Alexander looked at him. "Screen everyone. If they ask to see me, take a message. I'll decide." Charles nodded, hands folded behind his back. "Very well. I'll prepare the household accordingly." After he left, Alexander sat in the dark study, listening to the hum of the air conditioning. Outside, Los Angeles glowed through the smog, a carpet of lights stretching toward the ocean. He wondered if anyone would notice his absence or if the machinery he'd built would simply continue without him, efficient and indifferent. The announcement went out through proper channels. His attorney released a brief statement. Mr. Sampson taking time for health reasons. Full confidence in leadership team. Expected return undetermined. Within hours, his phone filled with texts. He turned it off. The next morning, the flowers started arriving. Enormous arrangements from a downtown florist, cards signed by people he'd met twice, gift baskets from pharmaceutical reps, a fruit tower from the hospital foundation board. Charles received them at the door, signed for deliveries, arranged everything in the front hall like an upscale funeral. Alexander watched from the upstairs window. None of it felt real. The gestures were correct, professionally appropriate, emotionally hollow. By the second week, the deliveries slowed. By the third, they stopped. His sister sent a note through her assistant. "Thinking of you. Let me know if you need anything." She didn't call. She didn't come. The silence he'd wanted arrived, and with it, a strange relief. No meetings, no performances, no pretending that transactions were relationships. The house felt larger, emptier, more honest. Only one person kept coming. Rosa Martinez arrived every Tuesday and Friday at 9 in the morning, just as she had for 4 years. She took 2 buses from East LA and the Red Line to Wilshire, then walked the last 12 blocks because the bus schedule didn't align. Alexander saw her through the security camera. Small frame, dark hair pulled back, worn backpack, moving up the driveway without hesitation. Charles met her at the service entrance. Alexander couldn't hear their conversation, only watched Rosa nod, pull out her supplies, and head upstairs to begin her work. She moved through rooms quietly, methodically, the way people do when work is both necessity and dignity. He didn't know yet what her presence would cost him, or save him. He only knew that on Tuesdays and Fridays the house felt less like a mausoleum. Rosa's mornings started in the dark. She woke at 5:30 in the 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother and son in Boyle Heights, the kind of neighborhood where security bars framed every window and corner stores sold mangoes next to lottery tickets. The building manager kept promising to fix the bathroom tile, but Rosa had learned that promises without signatures meant nothing. She made instant coffee, checked on Michael asleep in his twin bed, and laid out breakfast for her mother, Mrs. Elsa, who needed help getting to the kitchen table. Elsa's knees had been failing for 3 years, surgery postponed twice, because insurance kept finding reasons to deny coverage. Rosa had applied for medical financing, been rejected, applied again. Waiting had become a skill. "You working at the big house today?" Elsa asked, hands wrapped around her mug. "Yes, Mama." "That man still sick?" Rosa nodded, pulling on her jacket. "Mr. Barrett says he's resting. Doesn't want to be disturbed." Elsa made a small sound, something between sympathy and suspicion. "Rich people get tired different than us." Rosa didn't argue. She kissed her mother's forehead, checked that Michael's school clothes were laid out, and left before the sun cleared the horizon. 2 buses and a subway. 90 minutes if connections aligned. She carried a small lunch bag with leftovers from dinner, a thermos of coffee, and a paperback novel she'd been reading for 3 months, 5 pages at a time between stops. At the mansion, Charles met her at the side entrance, never the front. He didn't smile, didn't ask about her commute, just handed her the task list and reminded her that Mr. Sampson needed absolute quiet. "No noise in the upstairs hallway, no questions. If you see him, don't engage." "I understand," Rosa said. She'd never seen Alexander Sampson ill before, but she didn't need to see him to know something had changed. The house felt different, not dirty, but heavy. The air tasted stale despite the air conditioning. Rooms that used to smell like fresh lilies now smelled like nothing. She opened windows where she could, let California air push through the spaces, and worked methodically. Guest rooms first, upstairs hallway, then the master suite when Charles confirmed Mr. Sampson was in his office. The bedroom was massive. California king bed, sitting area, balcony overlooking the canyon. Rosa changed the sheets, smoothed the duvet, and noticed the water glass on the nightstand, still half full from yesterday. She emptied it, refilled it with cold water from the bathroom tap, and left it beside a small vase of lavender from the garden. Not because anyone asked, but because she knew what it felt like to wake up thirsty in a room where nobody checked. In the kitchen, she found Charles reviewing invoices with a vendor she didn't recognize. The man wore an expensive watch and spoke too loudly, the kind of voice that assumed agreement. Charles signed something, and the man left through the front door, which felt wrong. Vendors usually use the service entrance. Rosa didn't ask. She cleaned the counters, restocked the pantry, and noticed new items. Imported olive oil, specialty vinegars, items that didn't match the usual grocery orders. She made a mental note, filed it away, and kept working. Before leaving, she did something she'd started doing in the second week of Mr. Sampson's absence. She made soup. Nothing fancy. Chicken, vegetables, broth simmered on low while she worked. She portioned it into containers, labeled them with the date, and left one in the refrigerator with a small note on plain paper. "There's soup, if you're hungry." She never saw him eat it, but every Friday the container was empty and rinsed in the sink. Charles walked her to the door, handed her the envelope with her paycheck, always on time, always correct, and reminded her that next week's schedule might change. "Why?" Rosa asked. "Adjustments," Charles said. "Household efficiency." The word settled in her stomach like a stone. Efficiency meant cuts. Cuts meant people. She nodded, thanked him, and walked back down the long driveway toward the bus stop. On the subway ride home, she calculated rent, utilities, groceries, Michael's school supplies, her mother's medications. She could manage 2 months without this job if she picked up shifts at the diner. 3 months if she skipped her own prescriptions. After that, the numbers stopped making sense. She didn't pray often, but that evening, after Michael was asleep and her mother was settled, Rosa sat in the small kitchen and asked for one thing: let the work last. Alexander watched Rosa through the security monitor, a habit that had started accidentally and become routine. The camera was old, installed years ago when his father still owned the house, positioned to cover the upstairs hallway. He'd never used it to spy, only to verify that staff followed protocol. Now he watched because Rosa's presence had become the only predictable thing in his carefully orchestrated isolation. She moved with a rhythm he recognized, the efficiency of someone who couldn't afford wasted motion. No phone calls, no distractions, just steady work. She opened windows despite Charles's preferences for controlled climate. She replaced wilted flowers with clippings from the garden. She left notes. The notes fascinated him, simple, unsigned, left where he'd find them. There's soup if you're hungry. Bathroom window was stuck. Fixed the latch. Refilled the water pitcher. Each one a small proof that someone noticed the details of his invisible life. He started leaving the empty soup containers rinsed in the sink, a silent acknowledgement. Once, he wrote "thank you" on a post-it and left it on the counter. The next week, the note was gone, replaced by a new container of soup and a fresh vase of rosemary. The experiment he'd designed, 9 months to see who would care without incentive, was supposed to reveal his sister, his business partners, the woman he'd dated for 2 years, who'd left when his focus shifted to a clinic expansion. Instead, it revealed a housekeeper who took 3 buses and made soup. He felt ashamed, then curious, then something he couldn't name. In his office, surrounded by binders of audit reports and strategic plans, Alexander began noticing discrepancies. Small at first. Vendor invoices slightly higher than previous quarters, new suppliers without competitive bidding, duplicate charges for services rendered once. He flagged them, assumed administrative error, and made notes to address when he returned. But the pattern continued. Landscaping billed twice in 1 month. A painting contractor charging for materials never delivered. Luxury grocery items purchased, but never appearing in the pantry. He pulled up household expenses for the past 6 months and compared them to the previous year. The difference was significant, 30% higher, with no corresponding increase in services. Charles managed the household budget. Charles approved vendors. Charles signed off on every invoice. Alexander sat back in his chair, feeling the air conditioning hum through the vents. His isolation experiment had accidentally exposed something else. His absence had created opportunity. He accessed the security footage archive, scanning backward through weeks of recordings. He watched Charles meet with vendors in the kitchen, in the front hall, always when Rosa wasn't present. Watched him accept deliveries and immediately redirect them to his personal vehicle. Watched him alter invoices at the desk in the butler's pantry. Whiteout and careful rewriting. The realization came slowly, methodically, the way diagnoses do. This wasn't carelessness. This was systematic. Alexander's first instinct was to call his attorney, terminate Charles immediately, file charges. But something stopped him. He looked at the monitor showing Rosa leaving through the service entrance, backpack slung over one shoulder, already calculating her next bus connection. If he acted now, publicly, the household would implode. Staff would be questioned, scrutinized, possibly let go during the investigation. Rosa depended on this job. She'd done nothing wrong. And yet she'd be collateral damage in his corrective response. He needed more information. He needed someone who saw what happened in this house every day. Someone who wasn't complicit. He needed to talk to Rosa. But after 3 months of manufactured illness, of silence and observation, he didn't know how to begin a conversation that wouldn't expose the entire charade. He couldn't walk downstairs and casually chat with the housekeeper. Charles would know immediately that something had changed. So he waited, watching the monitor, and wondered if honesty was always this complicated. Rosa noticed the invoices by accident. She'd been restocking cleaning supplies in the butler's pantry when Charles left his ledger open on the desk, called away by a phone call. She didn't mean to look, but the numbers were right there, and some of them didn't make sense. Garden maintenance? $4,200. She knew the gardeners, 2 brothers from Pico Union who worked carefully and charged $300 per visit twice monthly. Even with spring plantings, the math didn't align. Painting contractor, $6,800. But no painters had come. She would have seen them, scheduled her cleaning around their work. Groceries, $2,100 for 1 week. She'd unpacked those deliveries herself. Standard items, nothing exotic, certainly nothing worth $2,000. Rosa heard Charles's footsteps returning and moved to the supply closet, heart beating harder than it should. She told herself it wasn't her business, that questioning numbers was a good way to lose employment. But the discrepancies stuck in her mind like splinters. Over the next 2 weeks, she began paying attention. She photographed receipts when Charles left them on the counter, careful to return everything exactly as she found it. She noted vendors' names, compared delivery logs to invoice amounts, and kept everything in a spiral notebook she carried in her backpack. The pattern became clear. Charles was inflating costs, pocketing differences, and using Mr. Sampson's absence to operate without oversight. Some vendors seemed complicit. The man with the expensive watch who'd visited that morning, the landscaping company that charged premium rates for minimal work. Others probably didn't know their invoices were being altered after the fact. Rosa's hands shook slightly as she wrote dates and amounts. This wasn't petty theft. This was systematic fraud, and it had been going on for months, maybe longer. She tried calling the HR department at Sampson Health Network, where household payroll was processed. She left 2 messages explaining she had concerns about billing irregularities. No one called back. She tried again, finally reaching a receptionist who said the HR director was managing the president's leave and couldn't take meetings about household matters. Rosa understood what that meant. Alexander Sampson was sick, possibly dying, and administrative staff were busy planning for transitions of power. A housekeeper's concerns about inflated invoices weren't priority. She kept the notebook anyway, documented everything, because if Mr. Sampson ever recovered, someone should tell him what happened while he was gone. On a Friday in late June, Charles called a staff meeting in the living room. Rosa arrived to find the part-time gardeners, the weekend cook, and the night security guard already seated. Charles stood by the fireplace, posture rigid, expression neutral. "Given Mr. Sampson's extended health situation," he began, "we're making necessary adjustments. The household needs to operate more efficiently. Some positions will be reduced, others eliminated." The cook, Maria, a woman in her 50s who'd worked for the Sampson family for 20 years, spoke first. "Eliminated? You're firing people?" "Restructuring," Charles corrected. "I'll meet with each of you individually to discuss your status." Rosa's stomach tightened. She knew what restructuring meant. She'd seen it at her last job, at her mother's factory work, at every place where efficiency became code for removing people who cost money or asked questions. After the meeting, she waited until the others left, then approached Charles. "When will you meet with me?" He glanced at her, expression unreadable. "Tuesday. Don't be late." She wasn't late. She arrived at 8:30 before her shift started and found Charles in the butler's pantry with her file open on the desk. "Rosa," he said, not looking up, "your performance has been adequate, but we're simplifying operations. Your position is being eliminated effective next Friday. You'll receive 2 weeks severance." "Why?" "Budget constraints." "The budget has increased," she said quietly. "I've seen the invoices." Charles looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. "You've been reviewing household finances?" "I've been doing my job. Sometimes that means noticing things. Noticing things that aren't your concern." Rosa felt her pulse in her throat, but she kept her voice steady. "Is that why I'm being let go? Because I noticed?" "You're being let go because we no longer need your services." He closed the file. 2 weeks. Use them to find other employment. She left the pantry, collected her supplies, and worked her shift mechanically. She didn't cry until she was on the bus, riding past Koreatown, watching the city blur through tears she wiped away before anyone noticed. That evening, she told her mother. Elsa listened, face tight with worry, and said what Rosa already knew. "You'll find something else, mija. You always do." But this time felt different. This time, Rosa had evidence of something wrong, and no way to make anyone listen. Alexander saw the termination happen on the security monitor. He watched Charles hand Rosa the notice, watched her shoulders tighten, watched her leave the room with her dignity intact, but her hope visibly shaken. He'd been expecting something like this. Charles had been consolidating power, removing witnesses, tightening his control over household operations. Rosa was too observant, too honest, too likely to notice what didn't align. Of course, Charles wanted her gone. Alexander stood from his desk, felt rage move through him like fever. For 3 months, he'd watched this woman care for his home without recognition or reward. She'd made soup, fixed windows, left notes. She'd shown more genuine concern than anyone in his professional or personal life. And now, she was being punished for her integrity. The experiment was over. He walked downstairs for the first time in weeks, moved through the hallway with purpose, and found Charles in the kitchen reviewing vendor contracts. The house manager looked up, startled, then quickly composed himself. "Mr. Sampson, you're feeling better? I want to see you in my office. Now." Charles followed him upstairs, maintaining his professional demeanor, but with a tension Alexander recognized, the controlled panic of someone whose scheme had been interrupted. In the office, Alexander opened his laptop and turned it toward Charles. The screen showed a spreadsheet, months of household expenses highlighted in red. "Explain these," Alexander said. Charles scanned the numbers. "Standard operating costs, everything's documented. These are inflated, duplicate charges, phantom vendors. I've been reviewing every invoice for 3 months, Charles. I've seen the footage of you altering documents, redirecting deliveries, meeting with vendors who don't appear in any official contract." The silence stretched. Charles's face remained neutral, but his jaw tightened. "You've been stealing from me," Alexander continued, "systematically, using my absence to build your own revenue stream through my household budget." "I've done nothing improper," Charles said. "If there are accounting errors..." "Errors?" Alexander's voice was quiet, controlled. "You fired Rosa Martinez because she noticed. That's not an error. That's retaliation." Charles straightened. "She was terminated for budgetary reasons. Reverse it. Today. Full reinstatement with back pay for the anxiety you've caused." "I'm afraid that's not possible. The position has been eliminated." Alexander stood. "Then you're eliminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you off the property. If you contest this, I'll pursue criminal charges. If you go quietly, I'll settle for termination. Your choice." Charles's composure finally cracked. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have contacts on your board, suppliers with long-term agreements, people who won't appreciate disruption." "I'm counting on it," Alexander said. "Leave." After security removed Charles, Alexander sat in his office and felt the weight of what he'd just done. Firing a household manager was one thing. Managing the fallout, political, financial, reputational, was another. He called his attorney, explained the situation, requested an emergency audit of household finances. Then he called Dr. Patel, the medical director. "I'm ending my leave," Alexander said. "Effective today." Patel hesitated. "Alexander, are you sure you're ready?" "I was never sick, Michael. I needed to see who'd care if I disappeared." The answer was clarifying. "You faked a medical leave?" "Yes. And in doing so, I let my household operations become corrupt. I need to fix this before it spreads to the company." After the call, he sat in the silence and realized the hardest conversation was still ahead. He needed to tell Rosa the truth, that he'd been lying for months, testing people, playing observer while she worked and worried and fought to keep her job. That her care had been real, and his illness had been theater. He didn't know if she'd forgive him. He wasn't sure he deserved forgiveness, but he knew he had to try. Rosa learned about Charles's termination from Maria, the weekend cook, who called Tuesday evening while Rosa was helping Michael with homework. "They fired Barrett," Maria said, voice crackling through the phone. "Security walked him out this morning. Mr. Sampson did it himself." Rosa's pencil stopped moving. "Mr. Sampson? He's walking around like nothing's wrong, meeting with attorneys, making calls. Charles is saying he was never really sick, that the whole thing was some kind of test." After the call, Rosa sat at the kitchen table, Michael's math problems blurring in front of her. A test. She'd taken 3 buses twice a week for 3 months, made soup, worried, prayed for a man who was never ill. She'd fought to keep her job, documented theft, risked everything, and it had all been theater. The next morning, she received an email from Sampson Health Network HR. Her position was reinstated. Full back pay for emotional distress. Apology for the misunderstanding. Meeting requested at her earliest convenience. She didn't respond immediately. She went to work at the diner, pulled a double shift, and tried to understand what she felt. Not anger exactly. Anger was too simple. This was something colder, more complicated. Betrayal mixed with exhaustion, mixed with the bitter knowledge that even her honest care had been part of someone else's experiment. When she finally went to the mansion. On Friday, Alexander was waiting in the kitchen. He'd lost weight, looked older, moved carefully like someone recovering from actual illness. "Rosa," he said, "thank you for coming." She set down her backpack, didn't move toward the cleaning supplies. "Is it true? You were never sick?" He met her eyes. "No, I wasn't." Then why? I wanted to know who would care if I disappeared, if anyone would visit without contracts or cameras, without something to gain. Everyone in my life operates through transactions. I needed to find out if there was anything else. Rosa felt something break inside her chest, something that had been holding her upright. And I was what? Your control group? No, you were the answer. I have a son, she said, voice shaking now. A mother who needs surgery we can't afford. I rode 3 buses to make you soup. I thought you were dying. I know. You let me think that. You let me worry. Yes. He didn't try to justify it, didn't offer excuses. I let you care, and I observed it like data. I was wrong. She wanted to walk out, wanted to tell him exactly what his experiment had cost. The sleepless nights, the calculations, the fear. But she also saw something in his expression, something raw and honest that wealth usually polished away. Shame. Charles was stealing, Alexander continued, for months, probably longer. I found evidence while I was... He stopped. While I was hiding. You noticed too. You kept records. I tried to report it. No one would listen. I know. That's my failure. I created a system where people could steal because I was too isolated to notice and too absent to care. He paused. Charles tried to fire you to cover his tracks. I've terminated him. There will be an audit. Possibly charges. Rosa sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly exhausted. What do you want from me? The truth, everything you documented, and then a decision. About what? Whether you'll stay. Not as a housekeeper, as household manager. Full authority over staff, vendors, budgets, fair salary, benefits, flexible hours. You'd hire Charles as replacement, ensure this never happens again. She looked at him. Why would I want that? Because you're honest. Because you noticed what was wrong and tried to fix it even when it cost you. Because I need someone I can trust, and you're the only person in my life who's earned that. Trust? The word tasted bitter. You lied to me for 3 months. I did. And I'll spend however long it takes proving I can do better. Rosa stood. I need time to think, to talk to my family. Take all the time you need. He handed her an envelope. Back pay, as promised. And something else. Inside was a check that made her hands shake. Enough for her mother's surgery. Enough for 6 months' rent. Enough to say no to this job and mean it. This isn't payment for forgiveness, Alexander said quietly. It's payment for what you actually did. Care for someone you thought was dying. Document theft. Risk your employment to protect my household. You earned this. Rosa folded the envelope, put it in her backpack, and left without another word. Mrs. Elsa had lived 73 years and developed strong opinions about men who complicated things. When Rosa told her about Alexander's offer, she listened silently, hands wrapped around her coffee mug, knees propped on the cushion Rosa had bought to ease the chronic pain. He lied to you, Elsa said finally. Yes. Tested you like some kind of science project. Yes. And now he wants you to run his house? Rosa nodded. Elsa was quiet for a long moment, watching morning light creep across their small kitchen. What does your heart say? That I'm tired of being lied to. What else? Rosa hesitated. That maybe he told the truth when it mattered. When Charles tried to fire me, when the stealing came out. He could have covered it all up, protected the household reputation. Instead, he exposed everything. Because you caught him, Elsa said. No, because he'd been watching the whole time. He saw Charles stealing before I reported it. He could have fixed it quietly, fired me to eliminate the witness, made it all disappear. He didn't. Elsa sipped her coffee. That's a low bar, Mika. Not stealing and not covering up crime. I know. Rosa rubbed her face. But the check, it's real. We can schedule your surgery. I can take time off, be with Michael, not worry about rent. You can do all that without working for a man who lied. I know. They sat in silence. Outside, traffic hummed on Cesar Chavez Avenue. Someone's car alarm went off and stopped, life continuing in its regular chaos. Rosa thought about the mansion's kitchen, the soup containers she'd left, the notes she'd written. She'd cared. That hadn't been experiment or strategy. It had been instinct. The same instinct that made her check on her mother every morning, pack Michael's lunch, notice when neighbors needed help. She didn't know how to not care. even when care wasn't reciprocated. If you take the job, Elsa said, make him earn it. Every day. No more tests, no more games. Just honesty. Rosa nodded. And if he can't? Then you leave. We'll manage. We always have. That afternoon, Rosa called the HR number and scheduled a meeting. Not at the mansion, at a Starbucks in Silver Lake, neutral ground, public space. Alexander agreed immediately. He arrived early, ordered coffee he didn't drink, and waited at a corner table. When Rosa came in, backpack over her shoulder, he stood. Thank you for meeting me. She sat across from him. I have conditions. Of course. First, no more lies. Ever. If you need to test something, hire consultants. Don't use people's lives. Agreed. Second, full authority. I hire. I fire. I approve vendors. You can review budgets, but you don't override my decisions without cause. Done. Third, if this doesn't work, if I find out you're lying again, if the job becomes something other than what you're describing, I leave with 3 months severance and a reference letter you personally sign. Alexander extended his hand. You have my word. Rosa didn't shake it yet. Your word hasn't meant much lately. He lowered his hand. You're right. So let me prove it. Actions, not promises. Stay for 1 month. If I violate any condition, you leave with 6 months severance. If you decide the job isn't right, same terms. No questions, no retaliation. She studied his face, the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he held himself like someone trying not to break. He looked genuinely afraid she'd say no. 1 month, Rosa said. Then we reassess. Fair. They shook hands, and Rosa felt the weight of what she'd just accepted. She was walking back into a house full of complications, working for a man who'd tested her without consent, managing staff who'd seen her nearly fired. But she was also taking control of something she'd only ever observed. The mechanics of wealth, the systems that determined who had security and who didn't. Maybe she could make it fairer. Maybe that was worth the risk. Or maybe she was just tired of running from things that scared her. The first month was harder than Rosa expected. She started the Monday after their Starbucks meeting, arriving at the mansion to find the remaining staff, Maria the cook, 2 part-time cleaners, the night security guard, watching her with cautious curiosity. She called a meeting in the kitchen. I know this has been difficult. Charles is gone. Mr. Sampson's health situation was misrepresented, and there's been a lot of uncertainty. I'm here to bring stability. I need your help. The cleaners, 2 women from Pacoima who'd been with the household for 6 months, exchanged glances. The older one, Teresa, spoke first. Are we being fired? No, but we're going to review everything. Contracts, schedules, vendor relationships. If something feels wrong or unfair, I need to know. Maria crossed her arms. What makes you qualified to run this place? It was a fair question. Rosa was 29, had been a housekeeper until last week, had no formal management training. I pay attention, she said simply. I notice when things don't add up, and I care about doing this right. Over the next 2 weeks, Rosa interviewed every vendor Charles had used. She renegotiated contracts, eliminated inflated services, found local businesses willing to provide better quality at fair prices. The garden maintenance went to the 2 brothers from Pico Union, who'd been underbid by Charles's preferred company. The painting contractor, who'd never actually painted, got replaced by a woman-owned business in Highland Park. The grocery delivery switched to a co-op that sourced from small farms. The savings were significant. 38% reduction in monthly costs without any decrease in service. Rosa documented everything, presented Alexander with weekly reports, and waited for him to override her decisions. He never did. Instead, he attended her meetings, listened to her proposals, and asked clarifying questions that made her realize he was learning, not challenging. When she suggested raising the cleaner's hourly rate to match union standards, he approved it immediately. When she proposed quarterly reviews for all staff with documented performance standards, he asked how he could help implement them. The shift unsettled her. She'd prepared for resistance, conflict, the typical patterns of wealthy men who hired people to manage problems then micromanaged anyway. Alexander did none of that. He showed up, paid attention, and trusted her judgment. "Why aren't you fighting me?" she asked one afternoon in his office after she'd presented a proposal to hire an additional housekeeper and increase everyone's benefits. He looked up from the budget spreadsheet. "Because you're doing this better than I ever did. Why would I interfere? Most people would. Most people would need to control things. I tried that. It led to Charles embezzling for 6 months while I sat in boardrooms thinking I had everything handled." He closed the laptop. "I don't need control. I need competence and honesty. You're providing both." Rosa sat down across from him. "The staff still doesn't trust you. They think you're watching them, testing them like you tested me. Are they right? I don't know. Are you?" He was quiet for a moment. "After what I did, the fake illness, the observation, I don't blame them for suspicion. How do I rebuild that?" "Show up," Rosa said. "Not as the boss, as a person. Eat breakfast in the kitchen. Ask Maria about her daughter's quinceañera. Learn the cleaners' names. Stop being invisible." The next morning, Alexander came to the kitchen at 7:30, poured coffee, and sat at the counter while Maria prepped vegetables. She looked at him warily. "Morning," he said. "Morning, Mr. Sampson." "Alexander's fine." She didn't respond, just continued chopping. "How's your daughter?" he asked. "Rosa mentioned she's planning something big." Maria's hand slowed. "Her quinceañera, next month." "That's wonderful. Have you found a venue?" And like that, the ice cracked slightly. Not broken. Trust didn't rebuild in one conversation, but softened. Over the following weeks, Alexander showed up consistently. He cleared his own dishes, helped carry groceries, asked about people's lives. He was awkward at first, too formal, but he kept trying. Rosa watched, surprised by his persistence. It would have been easier to retreat to his office, maintain the comfortable distance of wealth. Instead, he made himself vulnerable, accepted Teresa's jokes about his terrible coffee making, let Maria teach him how to properly dice an onion. By the end of the month, the household felt different. Not perfect, but functional, more honest. Rosa scheduled the reassessment meeting with Alexander, expecting to negotiate another month. Instead, he asked, "Do you want to stay permanently?" She'd been expecting the question, had prepared her answer. But sitting in his office, looking at the man who tested her and then trusted her, she found herself saying something different. Yes, but not just for a paycheck. Then for what? Because this place could be something better. Not just a mansion, a home, a place that treats people fairly, pays living wages, creates opportunities. That's worth staying for. Alexander smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Then, let's build that. The corporate fallout started 3 months into Rosa's tenure. The independent audit Alexander had commissioned finished its review of household finances, confirming systematic theft exceeding $180,000 over 18 months. Charles had been running a sophisticated scheme, inflating invoices, creating phantom vendors, kickbacks from complicit suppliers. Alexander's attorney recommended criminal charges. The board, when informed, panicked. Not about the theft, about the optics. Their president had faked a medical leave, conducted surveillance on his own staff, and let fraud continue for months before acting. The story leaked, predictably, through board members with their own agendas. The Los Angeles Times ran it first. Healthcare CEO faked illness in social experiment, staff exploited during absence. The article was technically accurate, brutally damaging. It mentioned Rosa by name, described her as a housekeeper who uncovered the fraud while caring for a boss who wasn't actually sick. Rosa's phone exploded with calls. Reporters, distant relatives, her son's school principal asking if everything was all right. She stopped answering. Alexander called an emergency board meeting, drove downtown to the Sampson Health Network headquarters, and faced 12 executives who'd been loyal until the scandal made loyalty expensive. Helen was there, sitting at the far end of the conference table, looking smaller than he remembered. "You faked a medical leave," the board chair said, not as question, but accusation. "You lied to staff, vendors, business partners. You put the company's reputation at risk." "I did," Alexander said. "I was wrong. And now we're dealing with media coverage, potential lawsuits from vendors claiming they were unfairly terminated, and questions from stakeholders about your fitness to lead." The vendors Charles worked with were part of the fraud. The evidence is documented. They won't sue because they can't afford discovery. That's not the point, another board member interjected. The point is your judgment. You created this situation. Alexander looked around the table. I created the situation by being absent, by trusting a house manager without oversight, by prioritizing my personal questions about loyalty over responsible management. I own that. Owning it doesn't fix it. No, but transparency does. I'm proposing we release the full audit, make it public, show exactly what happened and how we're correcting it. No spin, no PR, just facts. The board chair leaned back. That's corporate suicide. It's accountability. The fraud happened on my watch because I was too isolated to notice. I'm fixing that not just at home, but here. I want quarterly independent audits of all departments. I want anonymous reporting mechanisms. I want patients and staff to trust that this company operates with integrity. Silence. Then Helen spoke for the first time. I think we should vote on temporary suspension. Give Alexander time to address this personally while leadership manages operations. Suspend me? Alexander looked at his sister. Helen, I'm trying to make this right. I know, but you can't do that while defending yourself publicly. Step back. Let the board handle the media. Come back when this settles. The vote was 8-4. Temporary suspension, 3 months, pending review. Alexander would maintain ownership but relinquish operational control. He left the headquarters feeling something between relief and failure. Rosa learned about the suspension from the evening news. She called Alexander immediately. Are you okay? I'm fine. It's temporary. You were trying to fix things? I know. But Helen's right. I can't lead effectively while managing this scandal. The company needs stability. What about you? What do you need? He was quiet. I don't know. I've spent 20 years building something that just voted me out for trying to tell the truth. That's not what happened. They voted to protect the company. That's their job. Whose side are you on? Yours, Rosa said simply. But being on your side means telling you when you're being unfair, including to yourself. After the call, Alexander sat in his car in the parking garage and felt the weight of 9 months. The fake illness, the fraud, the exposure, the suspension. Everything he'd done to find authenticity had led to professional exile. Maybe he deserved it. Maybe integrity always cost this much. His phone buzzed. A text from Helen. Can we talk? He drove to her apartment in Santa Monica, a place he'd never visited despite knowing her address. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater, looking tired. Come in. The apartment was small, tidy, full of plants, nothing like the mansion where they'd grown up. They sat on her couch, and for a long moment, neither spoke. I didn't vote against you to hurt you, Helen said finally. I voted to protect you. From what? From yourself. You're so busy proving you can handle everything alone that you don't see when you need help. Dad did the same thing. Worked himself into a heart attack rather than admit vulnerability. Alexander felt something crack in his chest. I'm not Dad. You're trying not to be, but the fake illness, that was Dad's move. Testing people, manipulating situations to prove a point. I hated when he did it. I hate that you did it too. I was trying to find out who actually cared. By lying? By making people worry? Helen's voice broke. When I heard you were sick, I couldn't breathe. Hospitals terrify me since Dad died. I know I should have called, should have visited, but I couldn't make myself walk through those doors again. The confession hung between them. Alexander realized he'd been so focused on who hadn't come that he'd never asked why. I didn't know, he said quietly, because we don't talk. We send assistants and write notes and pretend that's family. Helen wiped her eyes. When I voted to suspend you, it wasn't punishment. It was permission. Permission to stop managing everything. Permission to be human. I don't know how to be human without also being CEO. Then learn. That woman who called you, Rosa, she cares about you. Not because you run a healthcare network. Because you showed up in your kitchen and tried to dice an onion. That's the version of you worth protecting. Alexander stayed until midnight, talking with his sister for the first time in years. They made plans, small ones, realistic ones. Coffee next Tuesday. Helping at a community health clinic Helen volunteered at. Building a relationship not on family obligation, but on actual choice. When he got home, Rosa had left soup in the refrigerator with a note. Board meetings are terrible. This helps. He sat at the kitchen counter, ate lukewarm chicken soup, and felt grateful for the first time in months. The suspension changed everything. Without the daily demands of running a healthcare network, Alexander had time. Too much time. He spent the first week restless, checking emails compulsively, calling his attorney to ask about reinstatement timelines. Rosa found him one morning in his office, staring at his silent phone. "Come help me interview gardeners," she said. "What?" "The two brothers from Pico Union want to expand their team. I need someone to evaluate their business plan. You're good at that." It wasn't a request. He followed her to the kitchen, where two young men sat with a handwritten proposal detailing equipment needs, client projections, and a 5-year growth plan. Alexander reviewed it, asked questions, and found himself genuinely engaged. "This is solid," he told them. "You need a small business loan to purchase commercial equipment. Have you talked to a bank?" The older brother shook his head. "Banks want collateral we don't have." "What about credit unions? PACE programs?" "We don't know how to access those." Alexander spent the afternoon researching financing options, calling contacts, connecting the brothers with a community development financial institution that specialized in small business lending. By evening, they had an appointment scheduled. "Why did you do that?" Rosa asked after they left. "Because their plan was good. Because they deserve a chance. And because you needed to help someone." He looked at her. "Is that bad?" "No, it's human." Over the following weeks, Alexander found new rhythms. He helped Maria's daughter research quinceañera venues, teaching her how to negotiate with vendors. He drove Mrs. Elsa to physical therapy appointments, waiting in the clinic lobby and learning about her life. Factory work in Michoacán, immigration at 23, decades of cleaning houses to raise Rosa and her late husband's memory. He met Michael, Rosa's son, a bright-eyed 7-year-old obsessed with soccer and marine biology. They watched National Geographic documentaries together, Michael explaining octopus intelligence while Alexander realized he'd never spent time with children, never considered what he was missing. "Do you want kids?" Rosa asked one evening. They were sitting in the kitchen after dinner, coffee cooling between them, comfortable silence that had become routine. "I used to think so, then work consumed everything, and it seemed impossible. And now I wonder what else I avoided because it seemed impossible." Rosa smiled. "You're figuring it out." "Am I?" "You're here." That's something. The 3 months passed quickly. The board scheduled a reinstatement hearing, reviewing the audit findings, Alexander's responses, and public perception data. The media coverage had been harsh initially, but faded as new scandals emerged. Patient satisfaction surveys remained high. The company's finances were stable. No lawsuits had materialized. Helen advocated for his return, presenting evidence of his community engagement during suspension. "My brother made mistakes," she told the board, "but he's taken accountability, implemented reforms, and demonstrated genuine change. That's the kind of leadership we need." The vote was 10-2. Reinstatement approved, pending completion of management training in organizational ethics. Alexander returned to work on a Tuesday, walked through the headquarters lobby, and felt strangely disconnected. The building, the offices, the meetings, all familiar, all slightly foreign. He'd been living in a different world, one with soup and soccer games and honest conversations at kitchen counters. Rosa was waiting when he got home that evening, had made dinner. Nothing fancy, just rice and chicken and vegetables. "How was it?" she asked. "Weird, like putting on clothes that don't quite fit anymore." "Give it time, you'll adjust." "What if I don't want to adjust? What if I want to stay in the world where I help gardeners write business plans?" "Then do both. Run the company better because you understand what real stakes look like." He looked at her across the table. "How did you get so wise?" "I take 3 buses. You think a lot on buses." They laughed, and Alexander realized something had shifted. Rosa wasn't his employee anymore, not really. She was something closer, harder to name. A partner, a friend. Someone who'd seen him at his worst and stayed anyway. "I want to tell you something," he said. "The experiment, the fake illness, was the stupidest thing I've ever done. I hurt you, manipulated people who trusted me, nearly destroyed everything for a question I could have answered honestly. Why are you telling me this now? Because I don't want anything between us built on lies. If we're going to—" He stopped. "If this is going to work, you need to know I understand what I did wrong." Rosa set down her fork. Are you asking if something's happening between us? I'm acknowledging that something already is, and I don't want to ruin it by pretending otherwise. She was quiet for a long moment. I care about you, more than I plan to, but I won't be your experiment. I won't be the answer to your loneliness. You're not. You're the person who showed me what honesty looks like, who taught me that care isn't transactional. He reached across the table, palm up, offering. I don't have pretty words for this. I'm not good at romance, but I'm here, I'm honest, and I'll keep showing up. Rosa placed her hand in his. That's all I need. Building a relationship while managing a household and running a company proved complicated. Alexander and Rosa approached it with the same methodical care they'd applied to vendor contracts. Clear communication, regular check-ins, negotiated boundaries. We tell the staff, Rosa insisted. No secrets. They called a meeting, simple announcement. Rosa and I are together now. That doesn't change your authority or your employment. If anyone's uncomfortable, let's talk. Teresa, the cleaner, raised her hand. Does this mean we have to act different around you? No, Rosa said. Same expectations, same standards. I'm still your boss, just with a complicated personal life. Maria smiled. Welcome to being human, both of you. The transition wasn't seamless. Some staff members struggled with the shift in power dynamics. A weekend security guard quit, saying he couldn't work somewhere with unclear boundaries. Rosa accepted his resignation, hired a replacement, and documented everything transparently. The media caught wind eventually. Someone photographed Alexander and Rosa at a farmer's market in Santa Monica, Michael between them pointing at strawberries. The headline was predictable. Disgraced CEO dating former housekeeper who exposed fraud. Rosa's phone exploded again. This time, she was ready. She released a brief statement through the company's PR team. My relationship with Alexander Sampson is personal and doesn't affect my professional responsibilities. I continue to manage household operations with full authority and transparency. Alexander added his own statement. Rosa Martinez is the most capable, ethical person I know. Our relationship began after months of professional respect and friendship. Anyone suggesting otherwise doesn't understand either of us. Coverage faded within a week, supplanted by other scandals, but the experience taught them something valuable. They couldn't control public perception, only their own integrity. Helen became an unexpected ally. She started joining them for Sunday dinners, brought wine, taught Michael card tricks, and shared stories about Alexander as a kid that made Rosa laugh. He was so serious, Helen said one evening. Even at 12, he walked around with a briefcase, practicing presentations. What happened to that briefcase? Rosa asked. Probably in storage. Why? Michael loves props for school reports. Maybe Alexander could donate it. The next week, Alexander dug through boxes in the garage, found the old briefcase, leather, battered, full of teenage business plans. He gave it to Michael, who immediately claimed it for his marine biology presentation. This is so cool, Michael said, running his fingers over the scratched surface. Did you really use this when you were a kid? Every day. I thought it made me look important. Did it? Probably just made me look silly, but it helped me feel brave. Michael looked up at him, serious. Do you still need help feeling brave? Alexander crouched to meet his eyes. Sometimes. Everyone does. Even CEOs? Especially CEOs. Later, Rosa found him in the garden staring at the canyon view. You okay? That kid is too perceptive. He likes you. Asked if you could come to his soccer game Saturday. Will you be there? Of course. Then I'll be there too. Saturday arrived warm and clear, typical Los Angeles autumn. Alexander sat in the bleachers next to Mrs. Elsa, who'd regained enough mobility post-surgery to attend games. Michael played midfielder, not particularly talented but enthusiastically committed. He tries hard, Elsa observed. That's what matters, Alexander said. My Rosa tries hard too. Always has. I know. You better not hurt her. He looked at the older woman, saw the steel beneath her gentle expression. I won't. But if I do, I hope you'll tell me. Oh, mijo. I'll do more than tell you. They watched Michael score a goal, lucky deflection off his shin, and joined Rosa in cheering. In that moment, surrounded by families celebrating mediocre youth soccer, Alexander felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: belonging. After the game, they went for ice cream, Michael chattering about the goal, Elsa teasing Rosa about her terrible parking. Alexander quietly paying and carrying everyone's cups. It wasn't dramatic, it was just Saturday. That night, after dropping Mrs. Elsa home and getting Michael settled, Alexander and Rosa sat on the mansion's back terrace, city lights sprawling below them. "This is weird," Rosa said. "What is?" "Being happy, actually happy. I keep waiting for something to go wrong." "What if nothing goes wrong?" "Then I don't know how to plan for it." Alexander pulled her closer. "We'll figure it out together." They sat in silence, watching Los Angeles breathe, traffic flowing like blood through arteries, lights winking on and off, the city's endless movement. Neither of them said, "I love you." They weren't ready for declarations, but the feeling was there, growing slowly, built on soup and honesty, and Saturday afternoons watching soccer. That was enough. 9 months after the experiment began, Alexander called a meeting, not at the mansion or corporate headquarters, but at a community center in Boyle Heights where Rosa's mother attended her quilting class. The room filled slowly. Household staff, some board members, Helen, Mrs. Elsa, Michael, the 2 Gardner brothers whose business had grown, local vendors Rosa had hired, even Teresa's daughter, who just started culinary school with a scholarship from a fund Alexander had quietly established. Rosa stood at the back, watching him prepare note cards he wouldn't use. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Something I should have done at the beginning, telling the truth publicly." He stood at the front, no podium, no script. "Thank you for coming. Most of you know what happened last year. I faked a medical leave to see who'd care if I disappeared. It was manipulative, arrogant, and deeply unfair to people who depended on me." Silence. Michael shifted in his seat. Mrs. Elsa watched with her unreadable expression. "I thought I was conducting an experiment about loyalty," Alexander continued. "Actually, I was avoiding the real question. Why didn't I have relationships worth testing? Why had I built a life so transactional that care seemed impossible?" He looked at Rosa. One person kept showing up. Rosa Martinez took 3 buses to make soup for someone she thought was dying. She documented fraud when it would have been safer to stay quiet. She risked everything to do what was right. When I offered her a management position, she had every reason to say no. Instead, she said yes, with conditions, honesty, authority, accountability. And she's transformed not just my household, but how I understand leadership. Teresa raised her hand. "So, why are we here?" "Because I want to expand what Rosa built. Sampson Health Network is launching a household workers initiative. Fair wages, benefits, training programs, paths to management. We're partnering with community organizations to provide job placement, legal support, and financial literacy resources." He gestured to a presentation board displaying program details. "Rosa will oversee the initiative. This isn't charity, it's investment. Studies show that stable, fairly compensated domestic workers improve household efficiency, reduce turnover, and create economic multiplier effects." Helen stood. "The board has approved a 5-year commitment. We're starting with 500 workers, expanding annually." Rosa stood too, moving to the front. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," Alexander said. "That's why you're the right person to lead it." She looked at the room. Faces she knew. People who'd watched her nearly get fired, who'd seen her relationship with Alexander develop, who'd judged and supported and gossiped. "If we do this, we do it right. No shortcuts, no savior narratives, just systems that work." "Agreed," Alexander said. After the meeting, people lingered, asking questions, sharing stories, connecting. Michael showed the Gardner brothers his marine biology project. Mrs. Elsa talked with Helen about expanding the physical therapy scholarship program. Teresa's daughter asked Rosa about management training. Alexander stood at the edge, watching it unfold. Helen appeared beside him. "You did good, hermano." "We did good. You kept the company stable while I figured things out. That's what family does." They stood together, watching their strange new community form. Not perfect, not simple, but honest. That night, back at the mansion, Alexander found Rosa in the kitchen making her signature soup. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For making soup when I didn't deserve it, for staying when you should have left, for teaching me the difference between transactions and care." She turned in his arms. "You're still learning." "I know. Good thing I have an excellent teacher." Teachers require payment. Name your price. Keep showing up. For me, for Michael, for your sister, for the people who depend on you. Just show up. I can do that. She kissed him, soup temporarily forgotten. Outside, Los Angeles hummed its endless song, traffic and helicopters, and the distant sound of someone's party, the city's perpetual motion. Inside, two people who'd found each other through lies learned to build something true. It wasn't the ending Alexander had imagined when he started his experiment. It was better, messier, harder, more real. He'd wanted to know who would care if he disappeared. The answer surprised him. The person who cared most was the one he'd almost overlooked, the woman who took 3 buses and made soup and refused to let wealth excuse dishonesty. 6 months later, they stood in a small chapel in Silver Lake, surrounded by household staff and family and community members who'd become friends. Michael carried the rings. Mrs. Elsa cried. Helen officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. The vows were simple. No grand promises, no poetry, just commitment to keep showing up, keep being honest, keep building the life they'd stumbled into. I promise to take the buses with you, Alexander said. I promise to teach you how to make decent soup, Rosa replied. Everyone laughed. They kissed, and the complicated, imperfect, honest life they'd created continued. That evening, at the reception in the mansion's backyard, transformed by the Gardner brothers into something beautiful, Alexander pulled Rosa aside. I still can't believe you said yes. To marriage or to the job? Both, she smiled. I said, yes, because you stopped testing and started trying. That's the version of you worth building a life with. They danced under string lights Michael had helped hang, ate cake Teresa's daughter had baked, and welcomed a community that existed because 2 people chose honesty over comfort. Later, much later after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, they sat in the kitchen, their kitchen now, and split a bowl of leftover soup. So, Rosa said, what's next? More of this, Alexander said, just this. And for the first time in his 41 years, that felt like enough.